I love that. If we wanted to, we could have like 1 billion people watching us right now.
We could.
So don't not
probably
to
do.
Sure no, I think we have 0. But now we're live. Hey, so hi, I'm Ladek. We are coming to you actually truly live from the Educause conference in Denver, Colorado right now. There's a lot of debate about whether or not Denver's the place to be. I, as a Coloradoan, say it is. I don't know. Kim feels differently. No, I'm just playing.
You do love Denver.
I'm told.
You do love it.
But we're going to be broadcasting all day today. I think we have 9 different people that we're going to talk to about equity, about learning pathways, about digital inclusion, about so many different things. But right now, Kim Oppels, Dr. Kim Oppels?
Opal, yep. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Opal, I apologize.
It's okay.
Why don't you take a few seconds to introduce yourself? Like you're with class, but
I'm with Kim. Yep, I'm with class. I am actually though an educator at heart. So I started my career out as a licensed school counselor. Did a lot of work in underserved populations, and then went to college counseling, where I started using some software and getting into ed tech. So I used that kind of passion for college and career readiness to go into a life of ed tech, and have been studying all things college, career, and life readiness, and all about what students need to succeed, not only in middle school and high school, but all through college, if that's the pathway to choose, but then, kind of reverse mapping it to what do they need to get to the career of their interest. So,
awesome.
Yeah, so I spent, I've been, I think, in ed tech now for 12 years, and
before anybody knew what EdTech was. I mean, that's great.
Yeah,
that's
I was a remote employee before working remote was cool.
Yeah, 100%.
and it's all things have led to working at Class, which is a virtual technology or virtual classroom technology.
Yeah. So the word I want to talk about for like 5 minutes here, like 2 minutes. Yeah. We all have talked about distance learning and online learning, and then there's in-class learning. But then I thought the word of the new normal was hybrid, but now you're throwing high flex at me. Yeah. So juxtapose high flex with hybrid for me, just so that we're on the same page about what that
is. So hybrid is having students learn in class and online at the same time, synchronous learning. High flex is allowing students really to pick their modality. So whether they want to learn online, in class, synchronous or asynchronously, they then get to choose that by day. So really, it's not one class that's all online asynchronously. It's a class that's built for students in the way that they want to learn when they want to learn. So
is that fair? I mean, I mean that in like it's kind of tongue in cheek, but it's also, I mean, if I'm a professor right now, which I am, I teach at American University. That's a lot of responsibility and a lot of like who manages that? Like who's like how do you serve those 3 needs at the same time?
Absolutely. So I think we've seen a lot emerge over the past even 2 years. I think high flex was in the making before that, but over the past 2 to 3 years, we've really seen campuses innovate. So they built teams of staff just around online, hybrid, and high flex learning. There are product experts, there are IT professionals, there are content experts and evaluators, and everyone comes together to create a class that really works. And it's not all on the professor's shoulders. So we're seeing, I was talking with Dr. Rasmus Ladek from Austin Community College yesterday, he was telling me about all of the tools that they put into what happens to make an online or hybrid or high flex class work. So it's allowing professors to just step in and use a template if they want to, or they can get highly involved in their own design. So,
but are those So are those professors? We were talking with somebody yesterday whose name is escaping me right now. We'll come back to it. But one of the things they discovered was, holy smokes! Now I actually have to train professors on this new suite of technology. Have you found through class or either through some of your other conversations that the new weightlifting around new technologies in this kind of suite are professors excited about that? Are we seeing attrition? Are we seeing new blood coming in and be like, oh yeah, finally what's the sentiment?
I think there's a little bit of both. I think over the when we moved to emergency remote learning, there was a competency that threshold that was overcome. I think
Sure.
we have professors, we have faculty, we have staff that are a lot more competent with technology than they ever were before. So they're more willing. I think that though, there's still a need for people to be in person, right? There are still professors, there are still courses that are taking place, a number of courses that are taking place in person.
Right.
But being online and having fully remote courses also allows colleges, universities, community colleges to expand their base. So they can hire people who are extremely competent in teaching online or teaching in high class situations. So you can find those willing people that are willing to, that are excited, that are going to put together courses that are engaging and accommodating for those students who want to learn remotely, or there are some that just won't ever adapt to it, and that's okay too.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah. So take a few seconds for those people who haven't heard of class.
Yeah.
What is it?
Absolutely.
I mean, I've seen it. I know. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to lie. We're actually a partner. We're partner organizations.
Yeah.
But for anybody who hasn't heard of it, where did it come from? What was its genesis? What problem does it solve?
Yeah. So class is a pandemic baby.
Oh, nice.
I
feel like there was a just article that was just published about like the baby bump of the pandemic.
Yeah.
They didn't think it was going to happen, but now it's happened.
Yep, exactly. So we are a true technology pandemic baby.
Nice.
And our CEO and co-founder Michael Chasen, he had some kids that had just moved to emergency remote learning, and they were just learning on a video conference. So it was very one-dimensional, not exciting, not engaging. And he looked at it and said, "We can do this better." So he had the knowledge and the tools and the team to pull together to build a virtual classroom on top of Zoom that allows students and staff to really make an engaging experience. So a virtual classroom that has tools built in to make learning interactive, to make learning fun, to make it personal, and to allow a lot of what is done in the physical classroom, in the physical, just the college realm even, so support and student services and tutoring and all of those things to happen in a setting that makes it a lot easier and user-friendly.
Awesome. And I apologize. It sounds like there may be a train coming into the conference hall right now. We'll see, but there's something happening over there. So when I think of, I think it literally is a train. Oh, well. I've seen class. For somebody who hasn't seen class and we're thinking about a virtual classroom, you've already mentioned the word Zoom, so I actually feel like people have a physical reaction to Zoom sometimes. Break that down for me, because when I saw it, I actually was trying to disabuse Ed Miller, and I said, don't stop this, because it's not Zoom. It doesn't look like Zoom at all to me. So what's the virtual classroom?
Well, the nice thing about being built on Zoom is that there's that infrastructure there, so we were able to use that great base that Zoom has built. But then make it really usable for a classroom. So we use Zoom every day in our work settings, but there's room for improvement when it comes to just having
a learning experience.
Exactly. So we have a whiteboard that we can use to collaborate. We can do breakout rooms that professors can deploy and break students out, and then share different resources for breakout room. They can also oversee every breakout room and pop in.
This is what I want to emphasize this, because honestly, again, as a professor, this is one of the coolest features that they built, that classes built, in that when you do breakout rooms, rather than having to hop in and out, and you don't really know, you can actually see what's happening inside each breakout room. You can send videos, presentations, questions to different breakout rooms, or concurrently and in parallel. That's the single coolest feature.
Absolutely. You can see, you never know what happens as a professor, what's happening in those breakout rooms once you put students in there. Are they talking about what you want them to talk about? Are they talking at all? So you can peek in, you can have a high level view and peek in on what's happening in all 6 or 10 breakout rooms. And if someone looks like they're struggling a little bit, you can pop in there, or you can chat to those breakout rooms, give them some extra support if they need it, and just see what's happening. So awesome. I love those breakout rooms. Yeah.
Something else for someone who's never seen it, I'd love for you to emphasize or talk about is the fact that you never leave the classroom when you're giving a presentation or when you're doing a video. Talk to me about that, that native experience.
Absolutely. So one of the other features and something that we use actually in our own work is to deploy websites. So we can open an LMS, or we can open a Google Doc, a shared Google Doc, and people can sign into their own their own website and interact with that website right within the class application. So they don't have to ever leave or click away from class, and they can interact the whole time there. You can do tests, you can do polls, you can, like I said, whiteboards, so share documents, play videos. So almost anything you need to do or share with students, you don't have to send a link. You just pop the link up and they can interact with it right within the tool.
Does this work? Or have you seen? Are people using it in a corporate space as well as like a higher education space? What's been the reaction in those two? Like, I don't know. We always we always seem to divide these two, like as if they're like different creatures entirely. Yeah. But what's the difference in what maybe the different reactions, or what are people finding valuable for us?
Absolutely, yeah. And being at Educause, I'm definitely speaking in terms of students, but corporate training development, class for work is really a big emerging field for us right now. With the remote working population increasing and really staying stable, we're not seeing a lot of big migration back to the workplace. We see a lot of remote work happening still. So it's really easy to onboard people, to do training sessions, to do even just work meetings with all of the tools that you need in a virtual classroom. So we're finding that businesses, big and small, are utilizing these technologies, especially in human resources, in training, in development, in settings, and even just, like I said, in their day-to-day meetings. So all of those collaborative tools are necessary.
Has the term HyFlex creeped into? I kind of feel like it is really applicable to the worker space as well, rather than what's the word I'm looking for? Rather than debating or getting into arguments about remote work, like has that creeped in?
Yeah, I think people are finding new ways to work now that more and more people are remote.
Hey, I live in Mexico City. I'm here to tell you, people have found different ways to work. Okay, like the digital nomad universe is
absolutely, and I think it's different cultures in different teams and in different businesses, but there are a lot of ways that people collaborate and have learned to communicate and work together, and you have to learn your strengths when it comes to remote work and what motivates you and what really produces. So yeah, I think a HyFlex setting in a work environment has been emerging, even if we don't call it that.
So talk to me about challenges. It's easy to, we're both fangirl fanboys of HyFlex learning, of being able to do things synchronously online, whatnot. What are still the deepest challenges that you're experiencing through class, or you've heard people talking about, like from the community college perspective, or even the traditional university college perspective?
Like, I think it's still new.
For some reason, it goes on mute. Chris, I'm going to ask the question again.
Do it.
Oh, just a few seconds. All right, cool. So we were talking about the biggest challenges that you're still experiencing. You're saying what's new, basically.
We've been meeting with institutions, obviously all week, and a common theme is where do we start? What do we do? If we want to get involved in HyFlex hybrid learning, we've been doing it a little bit, but we really feel like it could expand our enrollment, our retention, our course completion, graduation rates. So how do we get started, and what technology do we invest in? And I think just even being here and talking with others and learning from other institutions and even just the little pieces that they're doing and creating rooms on campus that are interactive and have video screens and how do you set up a classroom for hybrid settings. And so I think as more and more people continue to do that, we're going to see best practices emerge. We're going to see the data come out of it. So it's so new right now that it's a lot of trial and error, and we just need people who are innovative and excited and willing to jump in, and we'll be able to keep going on that bandwagon and continue to iterate on this technology.
Have you seen any applications? This is something I find
for me, if I'm a university or I'm a dean or a provost right now, I'm thinking, how do I use this to my advantage in the recruiting space?
Mm-hmm.
Have you
Absolutely.
started to see that with your contacts with the people, like, where, like, really it's like you kind of sell the higher ed experience differently? And what have you seen so far?
Absolutely. So very timely. Educause just came out with a study on modality preferences. So
That's right. This is like 2 weeks ago.
Yep, exactly. So they asked students where, how do you want to learn most? Do you want to learn all in the classroom? Do you want to learn partially in the classroom and online? What they saw was that the number of students who want to learn either fully online or mostly online increased by 20%.
Wow.
So I think we're at almost 30% of students who want to learn mostly or all online. So
and so now one would assume that would be a non-traditional student, what we would call a non-traditional student, lifelong learner, an adult learner, someone with kids, someone with a job. But is that also the 18, 19-year-old who's like, look, bro, I've got my gaming side hustle, I've got my thing, and I just want to.
And people want to maybe jump into the workforce earlier, or they want to, live in Mexico City and learn remotely.
Another plug for me. Hashtag Mexico
live
City.
in Denver. Right? But they don't. There are options, and the traditional learning situations and spaces are not here anymore. We have a group of students who has learned remotely for a year to 2 years, and some found out that they really thrived and liked it that way. And now as colleges, as institutions that that are not known for their pivoting and change, are actually going to have to pivot and change and completely change their mindset on this. So it's going to be interesting, but there are so many opportunities when it comes to enrollment, because not only for the small regional college, they don't have to just recruit out of their own backyard. They can recruit across the world.
Okay, so I'm glad you went there, because this is where my literally, for me, it seems to change the dynamic as well, as kind of like the a la carte higher ed experience, or like the leveling up experience, going from like that community, and I don't mean this in any disparaging way, but you go from the community college maybe to the local university to a regional kind of powerhouse. Like, do you see that? Is that a vision that is happening more and more?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'll have to look at cost. If cost is an issue for students, and they're learning online, then a community college is a great place to learn. And if a regional 4-year has some unique programs, then a student's going to gravitate toward that too online. So it's going to be everyone's going to have to find their niche, and they're going to have to promote it, and they're going to have to really work with students and understand what they want and who they want. And I mean, then the world is their oyster, really. So whoever does it well is going to strike gold.
That's fantastic. So I've taken up so much of your time here. I give you back to the crowds here. But final question is, what, as someone who's now working for Class, what are you most excited about over the next sort of, like, let's say 6 to 12 months? Is there a new feature that's coming out, or are there some new partnerships? Is it? I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah. So what I'm mostly looking forward to with Class is just the data. So we have so many clients coming on. We have so many diverse institutions coming together with so many other partnerships that I'm excited to see all of the data merge. I'm excited to see the students use this, and then I'm excited to see what the outcomes are, and how using a virtual classroom and really engaging students and measuring engagement is going to change the game for online learning.
Fantastic. Kim, from Class, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day today to speak with me. I guess your presentations are over.
They are.
Come
yes.
see you.
Yep.
But I wish you the best, and I hope we'll be able to talk again in the near future.
Thanks for having me.
I absolutely will ask you hard questions.
Oh boy.
Okay, everyone. Hi there. We're back at Educause Live. Just want to check in with Chris. All right. He says that our audio is okay. So,
Okay.
Kimberly Moore, you're Wichita State. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm the executive director of Workforce Professional and Community Ed at Wichita State. Been there about 27 years.
Holy smokes! My dad's from Kansas City. I've been to Kansas an awful lot. Tell me, like, so as someone, director of workforce, et cetera, what does that mean? What are you focusing on at Wichita State? Is that bringing people or making sure that students are leaving with a job at the end of the day, or what?
So I work mainly with older students, not
Okay.
the traditional age students. I work with those individuals that have been out in the workforce and maybe are looking to upscale or gain some new skills, because as we know, the workforce is constantly changing. And so there's always a need for continuing education. And so that's what we provide from my office.
Awesome, fantastic. And you actually just about an hour and a half ago gave your panel, or were part of a panel about micro-credentialing.
Yes.
And the thing that I found really interesting about at least the blurb on your micro-credentialing on the panel was that it can be done many different ways.
Yes.
And so tell us about the Wichita State experience. Like, how have you chosen to first identify this was really important? Second, kind of what the genesis was and bringing it in, and what have the results kind of been?
Well, I started with badge development about 8 years ago.
Okay.
So I consider myself an old goat when it comes
Yeah,
to digital credentials. It really came about as we were going to Chamber of Commerce meetings and other meetings of employers within our area. And what I was hearing was, we're hiring Wichita State graduates, but then we're spending a year to 2 years to upskill them so that they can do the job.
Mm-hmm.
So they're coming out with degrees, but they're not coming out with skills and competencies that enable them to do the work that we need done.
Okay.
And so we saw there was a disconnect. And so we began looking for ways in which we could meet employer needs and also the needs of our community, because at that time we were undergoing a lot of layoffs because of the pandemic.
Okay.
Well, through the years, back in 2008, there was the financial crisis.
Sure. Okay.
And we're very sensitive to the aircraft industry,
Oh, okay.
and we rely heavily on that as we have a large
Is
manufacturing.
it Bombardiers near you?
Yes, it's
Okay.
there, Spirit,
Okay. Yeah.
Airbus.
Right.
So we have a number of companies that are located in headquartered in Wichita.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so, we're always looking for ways to support them. And so people after that happened, and then the pandemic came along, especially where there were a lot of layoffs and people in need of jobs and new skills. We decided that not everybody needed. I've worked with engineers, and they already have bachelor's, sometimes master's degrees. They don't need another degree.
Right.
But what they do need are skills and competencies in areas of new technology.
Okay.
And so we saw opportunities there
Mm-hmm.
for badges in the workforce and healthcare, constantly evolving. And so again, another area where we could offer badges and upskill people so that they were able to keep up with modern technology.
And so, like, what are like the top 4 or 5 badges or the credentials that are at least in your area you're seeing? I mean, are they big brand driven like Salesforce and Microsoft and those kinds of things, or are these like, what are they?
So they're very specific to our area. They're like the first badge I developed was in the area of public health.
Oh, wow.
So I got to choose
Yeah, cool.
what the area was, and I had relationships in the area of public health. And so what I knew at that time, 7-8 years ago, is that public health was undergoing accreditation, health departments throughout the country. And Kansas was no different. And a lot of the people working in those health departments have degrees. They're nurses, administrators, they have masters in public health science. So they didn't need another degree. But what they did need were the skills necessary to develop their plan for accreditation.
Interesting.
And so we developed a series of 6 badges specific to that to help them guide them through the process of accreditation and support their employees. So it was their badges were open to anybody from the entry-level workers up through administration and on a variety of topics. And so that was really where we started, seeing that there was this need in the workforce, and that's where we began our badge journey, and that was our first series of 6 badges.
Tell me, okay, so the badge journey, I like that because as you say yourself, I developed my first badge. You said there. So you're not developing it through, another credential provider.
No,
So
these
how
are
are you?
ours.
Yeah. So how are you hosting them? Where do they? And then for someone who's a learner maybe right now out there, or even another university who isn't as savvy as you, what does that look like both for the institution as well as the learner in terms of where does it live? Who owns it? How do I prove that it's a real thing? That kind of stuff.
So I think that's an important distinction. At Wichita State, to get some clarity for it, the program is we define it as a credit course. So it's for credit, not non-credit, as it is in many other institutions. Of 1 credit hour or less. It is graded on a pass-fail, so it's either you're awarded a BG, badge granted, or an MBG, no badge granted. It lives on your official university transcript, so it stays with you forever.
Wow.
Unlike non-credit that you get a certificate and nobody really knows 10, 20 years later where it's at, this forever is part of your permanent academic record. And
so as long as the institution survives.
Yes, I think we're good because we've been around a long time, since 1800s. So
I actually have the problem. The place where I got my MBA no longer exists.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
that's a political situation. Nothing.
I think we're safe. So you know that when you get something from Wichita State, that it is also met, because it's for credit, it is met the credentialing process of the Higher Learning Commission, as well as if it's a badge in the area of social work, it has underwent their review and their accreditation standards for their specific department. So, for example, our badges live in colleges. I am not a college, I'm a department.
Right.
So I have to partner with an academic college, with the dean and the department chair and the faculty of the academic colleges. They are the host, the home for the badges.
Wow.
So the badges meet very strict criteria. Badges you have to have a pass rate of 80% or better on every assignment in order to get that BG.
Okay.
So it is not dumbed down education as some people think. All our badges are online, so they're fully accessible to people, especially in the workforce who may travel. In the aircraft industry, that's very common to travel to different locations for your work. Or in public health, for example, when COVID came along, a lot of people, it was disruptive to the workforce. And so people had to schedule things around the extra responsibilities that they took on because of it. And so badges are very flexible. For fall, our badges, you can begin a badge in August, but you also can begin it up until about the week before Thanksgiving. So unlike regular academic courses where you begin at a certain date in August and you end at a certain date in December, that's not badges. Badges have to be flexible in order to meet workers' needs.
Of course, yeah.
And so you can begin a badge in August. Let's say you have to go to France on business and you're gone the month of September. Perfectly okay. Self-paced in that you can continue on while you're there, or you may need to pick it up when you get back. You must complete a badge in the term in which you started.
Okay.
Sure. So it must be completed in December.
Fantastic.
But it's very flexible. We've really designed it with the worker in mind, and so that it's something that they can do on their time. And there is, unlike a MOOC, people always ask me, well, is this like a MOOC?
Yeah, sure.
Is there any live person associated with this? Yes, there is. We have faculty, our regular faculty, that meet all the requirements of the Higher Learning Commission. And so they interact. It's a little bit different in that you may have a single person going through a badge in August and another that starts it in September. So it's not necessarily a cohort like we see in a regular academic classroom. It's very much their discussion boards, and past students, the work that they've contributed to discussion boards are also something that can be accessed by the students. So they can see other questions that were asked. And there are assignments. So some of it is online, and the student works through, and then there are certain measures built into the system that they have to achieve the 80% or better pass rate on. And then there are written assignments or projects also that then have to be submitted to the instructor at the university.
That are graded.
Grades it. So no, it's not like a MOOC. It's an actual live faculty member that you interact with that follows you through the class, responds to your questions, and interacts with you on an individual basis.
So is this, so now take me to some of the reception, again, I mean, now you've been doing it for years, so you've got a process, and this is a known thing. But is it seamless when you go to another college, or maybe there's a do you? Wow, I've got all kinds of questions. Sorry. So are colleges coming to you and saying we want to develop a badge? How do we do this? Or
Yes.
are you proposing to them? Is it both ways? And then sort of a sub question is, do you find that the departments and the professors are apologists? Are they like able to fit this in as a part of their modality in teaching? They're like, look, I've got some in-person classes, I've got some of these badges that I'm paying attention to, etc. Like, how does that work after the badge is developed?
So colleges come to me all the time for advice. And I'm happy always to share my experiences. And I always tell them, don't start where I started, start where I am.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yes. And so I can save them a lot of time and effort if they talk to me now versus the person I was 8 years ago when I too was looking for people to talk to. And so I don't go out and seek people. People tend to seek me for advice, and I'm happy to provide it. I don't operate a consulting business on the side. I just do it because it's important to share our work and to support other institutions in what they're doing. And so as far as, I'm trying to get your second part of your question, we were interrupted by
Sorry. So I was
sound.
basically saying, do departments approach you? First of all, for instance, there's a new college that says, hey, we would like to create a badge. But then what's the training? Is there a training process, or how do professors fit that into their modality of delivery?
Right. So people approach, in the beginning, no one approached me. The president...
You're out there selling.
The president mandated that every college, we have 6 academic colleges, would put forward 2 badge proposals every fall. Well,
that's ambitious.
It was ambitious, and it may not be, in hindsight, we ended up with a lot of badges, and I call it quantity over quality.
Okay, sure.
And that's really important to note. It's not the quantity of badges, it's the quality of badges. And really, badges aren't a good fit for every subject. And so I'm approached a lot by faculty, and they have a passion project, a personal interest.
Sure.
And they said, I want to do a badge. And I said, well, tell me about it.
Mm-hmm.
And medieval history. I'm like, so what's the workforce need for this? Well, there isn't.
Yeah.
So we require, when a faculty member or college comes forward with a badge proposal, that they have supporting data that says that there are this many job openings in this area, that people are not being hired, they can't find qualified candidates because they're lacking the skills necessary to do the job, things like that, maybe national studies or data from recognized publications that deal in that. And so they have to put forward some effort into researching and supporting their idea, because that avoids a lot of badges that maybe...
I think that naturally as well, that's just a great practice to make sure that the ivory tower is connected to the real world, right?
Yes. And so, where we started was that way, where faculty were encouraged to come to us with any idea, and then we would turn it into a badge. Well, over 7 years, we developed over 90 badges. Lots of different badges. Jazz improv. Well, that really wasn't very...
I haven't seen many of those on LinkedIn.
No. There are not many jobs for individuals that need that skill. However, the badges that did really well were the badges that were for licensed professionals. So nurses, social workers, engineers, people that needed relicensure. So our badges not only provide college credit, but for licensed professionals, contact hours for relicensure.
Sure,
so,
ongoing education.
Yes. And so that's a really additional benefit of the badges. And so our badges, the instructors are paid a stipend to develop the badges, and then they're also paid a stipend to teach the badges. And so it's overload in most cases. And so that's good. I mean, they're paid overload to teach and to develop the badges. And so it's not part of their regular duties. They come to us with these ideas. I had one faculty member, she's developed 12 HR badges, which were really strategic because the people that you need to convince of the value of badges are your human resource managers, all of the workers. And So she created a badge
She knew what
series.
she was doing.
Yes,
Yeah.
for human resource managers.
Mhm.
So then they got to experience badges, so they knew what they were sending their employees to, what the experience would be. And so faculty come with ideas. Again, they're vetted and they're funded. And then we launch about 8 to 10 new badges a year now.
Wow. And so when it comes, you said they're overloaded when it comes to developing the badge. What does that look like on the other side then? So let's take this HR professional, someone who's already teaching a full full course load. They've got maybe research as well that they're doing. And then this is another piece of their teaching portfolio, or?
It's overload. They're paid overload to teach it.
Oh, okay.
So she's amazing.
I was going to say, she sounds like a person who we probably need to meet.
Yeah, well, we had a badge instructor, and he had over 400 students. And I told you how our badges, you could start them over a period of months. He was managing like 400 students, trying, at all different stages of the process, and it's pretty amazing. And the students, we evaluate the students, and they had a great experience with him. So, yeah, it's an interesting process.
Awesome. I think I need to wrap up because I think that our next guest is here. I apologize. I was having so much fun with this conversation. I didn't realize that the half hour went like that, as usual. But how does somebody get in touch with you? Like, can they just reach out at Wichita State and say,
Sure.
hey, I'd love to figure out how to, because the part I didn't ask you about was what's the tech actually look like in order to be able to, if I'm a learner, how do I put this out there to show that it's real? Where do I point employers to, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, we use Credly as our badging platform, and once you are awarded your badge, you can claim it on Credly, and then you can link it to your LinkedIn, your Smart Resume, various different platforms, however you want to share it. They can contact me by going to wichita.edu/badges, and there you will find contact information, our badge catalog, all sorts of information on what we're doing.
Thank you so much for coming by. This has been fascinating. Have a good day.
Thank you.
All right, up next, we'll see. Chris will put it up there on the screen. Okay, Chris, can you hear me? All right, sounds on. Fantastic. Wonderful. So we're back here at Educause Live. We're here with not only Michael Cubitt, but we brought his guy, Ann Clancy, as well, which I apologize that your name is not on the screen. It's my faux pas. I take full responsibility for it. Both of you are with T-Mobile. But what I'm going to find really, I find really fascinating about this conversation that we're about to have is that yesterday I had on the show a group of individuals from California State University System who are raving about their increasing, their program on providing devices to individuals to increase, to basically
Their success program.
yeah, about how do we reduce this digital divide?
Yep.
How do we give access to people, etc. Your conversation is really interesting as well, though. It's let's have a conversation about what those devices mean. How do we make this as successful as possible, and what challenges exist around it? Before we dive into the real boot, so Michael, can you just, by the way, everyone, I'm a little embarrassed because I gave away one of my lapel mics. So Kim, if you're out there, can you please bring my microphone back because it's still stuck to your lapel somewhere. But that will reappear. So I'm going to hand you the mic. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you came from, what you're doing at T-Mobile right now, like what are the research that you look at in this kind of
Sure. Thanks, Ladek. Michael Cubitt. I'm with T-Mobile now, actually just a little shy of 2 years, so October 31st to be there. Prior to that, I spent 35 years in higher education. Most recently, I was the Vice President for IT, Chief Information Officer at Penn State.
Okay.
Prior to Penn State, I was at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio, as their Deputy CIO. My role at T-Mobile and Ann and I work really, as colleagues. She really handles sort of one side of the U.S. and I handle the other side. But it's really to help T-Mobile develop a strategy for higher education. We'll talk more about this, but that's really what's led us to this digital equity conversation. Really looking at sort of connected devices for students.
Thanks. So I'm Ann Clancy, and I've been with T-Mobile for just a year and a half. Michael and I are the only two in this role, and I come from higher ed space as well. I spent 14 years as tenured faculty and most recently as Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs, sitting in the provost seat at City Colleges of Chicago. My personal passion is access and equity. Working in a community college system, I saw a lot of students who didn't have the resources that they needed to be successful. Interesting thing is, before coming to T-Mobile, I didn't consider digital equity as part of that. We looked at, housing and food insecurities and mental health and health resources, but never really considered the access to technology and connectivity until the pandemic hit. And I think I'm not the only one who can say that, right? So the pandemic, unfortunately, shed light on this issue, this really large issue of access to technology and connectivity. So that's where sort of our space comes in, and we think about how can we use the T-Mobile platform and how can we work nationally, speaking with hundreds of colleges and universities throughout the country, assessing their challenges and coming up with solutions to help solve for some of these challenges from a digital equity perspective.
Okay, all right. Well, then take me there. Why don't we just start with you? I talk pretty loud, so I hope they can hear me.
Hold the mic for you.
Yeah, no, thank you. So yesterday we were talking with 4 individuals from the University of California system, or California State University system, and they were raving about their digital device policy. We talked a little bit. I love that you continue to put into the equation not only the device but also the bandwidth that you need, the actual connection itself. What are you starting to research? What do you see? What are the pieces of that equation that you think are important to put on the table that need further investigation?
Yep.
Think here on this problem.
Yep. So I'll piece together some of the data that we've been able to pull from what's out there. There's not a ton of research out there. We have seen from California State University Systems, Educause did a study that was published. The CSU system did a study that was published in Educause that basically stated students wanted devices, they wanted connectivity, they saw a need for it. And so that prompted, actually it was that study, I think, that prompted Michael and I having this discussion about how can we further this conversation. We looked at data from the Hope Institute, which is that that shed light on challenges and resources that students have, which is food insecurity, housing insecurity, and homelessness. 60-some% of community college students and about 40-some% of four-year university students experience food insecurity, housing insecurity, and or homelessness. That's a significant number. And if those students are experiencing those types of insecurities, imagine the challenges to maintain a device and connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, do I eat or do I pay my cell phone bill?
Right.
That's a challenge that no college student should ever have to go through, in my opinion. So those two data, and then we put on top of it Pew Charitable Trusts. We put out data that showed that students and families who make less than $30,000 a year, is it? I don't have it in front of me. Don't have access to a device, a smartphone, or connectivity. So when we look at the Pell eligible students in the United States, that correlates about with that data.
Okay, sure.
Okay? So we know there's again a significant number of students who are challenged economically but don't have this.
I want to put a number that I believe, if I remember correctly, Michael, when we were having our pre-conversation a week ago or two, you said that's something like 8 million students or something like that that are Pell eligible that fit into this universe.
Yeah, there's approximately 16 million students in the U.S. education system. Yeah, there's approximately 8 million, a little more than 8 million Pell eligible. So it's a significant issue. When we think about the digital divide, we like to refer to it. I kind of refer to it as like it's school, right? So there's the device, there's the connectivity, and then there's the knowledge of how to use that device, digital literacy. Right? So how to use that device that's not only going to support your life as a student, but it's going to support your life as a digital citizen, right? As the even the ability to be employable. So if you look at, one of the things we did in our presentation yesterday was look at, World Economic Forum data on job skills. So if you look at that list, every single one of those actually require a foundation of digital literacy. So this issue that we've kind of been exposed to the pandemic is so much more than, as some have referred to it, this is a life gap. These are life skills that people are going to need to be productive citizens in the 21st century.
So you want to add to that? Or?
Well, from an institutional perspective, so when I think about what institutions need, based on those skills and those digital literacy skills, general education requirements, for the most part, all have outcomes that require that being able to sift through information, knowledge, critically think, and process that information. Back when institutions were built, this was all in the library, right? This was all book. It's very different when you're processing it digitally because you have to sift through all of this information that may not be reliable or valid information points. So digital literacy versus literacy is really important, and making sure that students have that ability to have the correct devices, understanding how to use them, and sift through that is part of institutional outcomes as well. And so I think about this from my old chair where I'm always matching how are we getting to student outcomes? Are we providing the resources for students to be able to do those outcomes and how do we measure those? Having a device connectivity that is reliable in order for them to get to that point is also important for these institutional resources, if that makes sense.
It does, absolutely. So I want to, at the risk of tying the two conversations together, so we talked about this just briefly with the California State University people yesterday, about how one of the big discoveries was, when we give a device, we have to give training with it, right? We have to give, support. And they also talked a little bit about sort of extemporaneous support groups that were happening, student peer-to-peer groups that were happening in order to lift each other up, and who do you ask questions to? Where are they going to find solutions? Those kinds of things. So talk to me about either your presentation panel that you had. It was this morning, correct? Yesterday. What was the feedback? What did people come to you with? Was this a big aha moment for a lot of people, or did people already have successes or challenges that they put on the table and wanted to discuss, or what did you find?
Yeah, I think our goal,
we go a little closer.
Yeah, I think our goal, not only for yesterday's presentation, but this whole dialogue really is to bring awareness, right? This is, we really believe this approach not only provides digital equity, but it creates the opportunity for really a transformation, a digital transformation platform. We actually believe that this is really a viable way to really address students and to not think about this piece of technology as a piece of technology, but as an extension of the campus. It's interesting. I was in Michigan, judging a hackathon back in the spring.
That's awesome.
And yeah, one of the things that we know, mental health is a huge crisis in higher education, and institutions cannot have enough professionals on staff to be able to support all the students that they need. So this group of enterprising students basically came up with an idea to do and build an app for peer-to-peer counseling, so that students could actually go through like professional training, by the professionals on staff to be able to do some crisis management. And when a student's in crisis, they basically open up the app and they're met immediately, by another peer student that sort of, has been trained in what questions to ask and what flags to raise, and they can escalate if they need to. But I thought, boy, what a brilliant way to provide sort of a support mechanism. We know, from some of the data that Ann shared earlier about, the number of college and university students that are, food insecure, housing insecure, homeless. Many of those students are first generation. They don't know where to go. They don't know how to navigate those resources. Many of them don't want to self-identify for all the reasons that folks don't want to self-identify. 100%. The technology sort of creates removes that barrier. So those resources can be placed on a device for those students, so they could actually find those resources themselves without having to go to an office or without having to identify or sort of go through, the embarrassment or the stigma that they might perceive.
This is going to be one of those layman questions, right? As someone who's not involved in the research or anything like that, it seems to me like this is one of those discoveries, one of those where I'm trying to struggle with what would anybody challenge you on, right? Where would it, what is there any pushback on this or anything like that? Like, where's it coming from?
Not that I want to draw light to it, but
the detractors.
But to be fair, so financing it is the largest challenge, right? So we have a budgeting model paradigm that is, we already spend so much money on students. Why would we spend more money? And this is cost prohibitive and all of those issues. But Michael and I both believe that if we look at the cost of losing a student, we don't want to tell college and universities how much that costs them, but we know
especially like a
upwards
dropout, right? Because you invest everything to bring them in, you onboard, just like an employer. You onboard them, and then when they leave, that's all gone.
It's upwards of $1 million if they lose a student with a high-end institution. So if you provide a resource that extends the campus to them, provides resources to them, how much more likely are? I would love to do a study on this. We have a little bit of data, and I'll share that with you in a second. So the financing piece is one of it. The other is obviously the pushback of, well, our students already outcome devices. Okay, yeah, but right, we have data that shows that they're not always reliable. Sometimes they're old and they can't handle the software that is needed in order for them to be successful in classes. And what about the students who really can't or don't know how to do this? Maybe those students are in the periphery and we don't see them, but they're there.
I would also just think the recruiting opportunity. This is something I've been speaking with a lot of people where how many students are not choosing even to apply or considering, especially at the community college level or the state level, because they're like, look, I can't keep up anyway.
Well, there's a recent article that came out that showed that, was it like a third or a half of community college students dropped out during the pandemic because they didn't have reliable connectivity devices to do their work.
They couldn't go to a lab, they couldn't, get the resources on campus, those kinds of things.
In my school, we had students literally sitting in the parking lot on their phones trying to do their homework.
Yeah, I've heard that story several times. Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
So the challenges. So that was one piece, and then the final one is, student privacy, right? So students are afraid. They have their own devices. They don't want something because they don't want us to monitor them and things like that. Well, that's a whole nother conversation about the data that schools collect on students and not, and what privacy is and all of that. But the intent here is not to monitor students' behavior, and so I think that could be socialized, and I think that could be overcome. And those are the ones I've heard. I don't know if Michael has heard any.
Yeah, I think broadly is, we've never done it that way before, right? And so it's just the ability to introduce change, right, in an industry, if I could use that term, that is not really known to be very agile, right? So, but I think one of the things, is to really think about this, as a digital transformation. This enables new business models. things that we could do to engage students that we've never been able to do before. So, we were talking to some security professionals earlier. So, one of the things that we know is that the risk profile for every university went up exponentially during the pandemic when everybody went home and started working on their license. So that's a huge threat. That's a huge expense to every university. How many universities have been shut down, right, because of ransomware? I think the other part of this, we talked about like student engagement and monitoring retention, and you have to sort of make that balance of student privacy. But it's interesting. I think it's kind of a generational conversation, and those folks in our generation are more concerned about the privacy than the students are, because they sort of live on the internet, right? And even a device, you can select whether you make it location aware or not. So we were chatting like with the use case earlier. So say you have a device, and that device essentially knows your schedule and knows, all right, I should be in these 5 classes these times a week. And so say you're, and it's essentially collecting a 1 and 0. Are you there or not, right, when you're supposed to? So a student reaches the midterm and say they get a D on their midterm. They're first generation, they're really not sure where to turn. It gives the college or university the opportunity for a planned intervention, where it's like, okay, you got a D on your midterm, but you miss class half the time. You have to go to class, right, to be successful. I mean, just that kind of reminder. Some folks may feel that's intrusive, but I think it's part of the conversation. I think the other aspect of this is thinking about the ability to push messaging and really extend that campus experience. So even to the point of being able to push advertising, tasteful advertising out to students. They're sort of used to it in all the platforms they're on now. But now it becomes a revenue generator for the university to offset what would historically just be seen as an expense.
Thanks. I wanted to add and go back to the piece about the data and thinking about understanding where students are and how successful they are or not, and from a standpoint of, again, my brain always thinks about outcomes and creating interventions to ensure that students are successful. And if you have data that shows, this sort of goes to this point, that students who stay on campus during the midterm week are more likely to do well and pass their midterms or finals than those who don't. You can create a program to entice students to stay on campus, right? 100%. But if you don't have those data, then you don't know how to do that. And those are the types of things that the student success folks would love to have and to be able to do. And it also goes along with when and I always think about accreditation because that's a really big part of academic and student success. Is you have an ability to identify a challenge or a problem and then create an intervention and monitor the outcomes. The data that's available because of having the devices that are able to collect that data is going to be really impactful in the future. And Michael, you mentioned the word intrusive. One of the high impact practices that we use in student services is intrusive advising. I mean, it's actually called intrusive advising because there are many students who really need that high touch advising. So being a bit intrusive, especially in that, it's kind of important. They're young adults who need a little bit of that product.
I don't know, maybe I'm old school. I have as much gray hair as you, and so it's. I find that interesting because the university system came out of the mentoring model, and the mentoring model is mimic me and do it. I'm going to tell you what to do, and I'm going to start to mold you. And yet we've flipped that conversation in that don't tell me what I'm going to do. Like, no, I'm going to forge my own path. And yet, when I've seen learners in my life that I've worked with, some of them do much better when they have direction, when it's spelled out, when it's specific, those kinds of. Of course, there's always a few souls that really, look, that you need to let them go because that's a rarity. I feel like it's a rarity rather than the norm. And then I just want to offer as well. I mean, you guys both work for a large corporation, T-Mobile. I was speaking with the California State people as well. Which I feel like there's a huge branding, device or platform adoption opportunity for any of these organizations. For any small university or community college to go out and say, look, partner with us, give our students devices, and guess what? They're yours for however long until they figured out some other thing. But that's a tried and true model. You don't see that out there.
So again, we're pretty new to this space. We've been here for we've been in this space Michael started 2 years ago. So he kind of started as a lone ranger, gathering information and talking to schools. I came on 6 months-ish after him. So a year and a half plus some change, we've been in this space. So, it takes a long time in higher education to kind of get adoption, but we also want to be careful and make sure that we're having the right conversations. We don't want to just come in with assumptions. So that's why we've spent a lot of time talking with colleges and universities. But we did work with one community college in Tennessee, Monroe State Community College, and we did sort of a joint program where we provided free devices to students, and the college paid for the connectivity for all of their first-year students. 2,100 devices. Wow. And actually, the data is online. You can find it. It's on Monroe State Community College. The president posted an ebook to share a little bit of the program. And the outcome of that was that the adoption was slow. Students were a little bit leery. This is too good to be true. Mm-hmm. And then, there's some qualitative and quantitative data that the school collected. So the students then found that it was really nice to have all of the resources because the phone included, so it was a 5G phone with a 5G hotspot, and it also had preloaded resources for the students. So it had mental health resource, food and housing resources. So if the students needed to go somewhere for help, they could go to the app on the device. It had preloaded the contacts of their advisors and faculty, their LMS, their tutoring program, Khan Academy, all of the things that a student would really need to access, and it was all right there on the apps that were provided for the students. And so it was really nice because the students said qualitatively, they had a phone that they were able to use just for school, and it was all of their resources, and they toggled, if they had a device to toggle the hotspot, they didn't have to worry about bandwidth at home. And some of the students used that for a lot of their work. The biggest point of this that made me really excited and actually brought tears to my eyes when I heard the data is that their fall to spring retention for the students who utilize the devices was a 5% increase from the year before. Now, I used to work in a community college setting. We literally had a party when we increased our retention by 0.6%. Because it's really it's hard to move the needle like that. Mm-hmm. A 5% increase in retention is humongous.
That's especially, and then if you take it to larger populations, like again, it's California State, it's 500,000 students. Yeah, if I move 5%, like that's a tremendous amount of lives, right? Yeah,
I think within the context of sort of T-Mobile, I think as Ann had shared, I think what this gives us the opportunity is really have these conversations nationally. Right. So, and really a couple of the reasons why we're both here is that, our mission as a company is to connect our customers to their world. Mm-hmm. It's not easy for us to sort of take that and translate and say, well, the mission within higher ed is to connect learners to the world's knowledge, right? Which we know we're all sort of carrying around that access in our pockets every day. So that's really powerful for students to think about how to leverage technology in a way that's really going to benefit them. So,
may I just because I had a really powerful conversation with a gentleman named Michael Phillips, who is a professor in Australia at College of Monash University. We have a partnership with them where they're providing online education to people displaced by the Ukrainian crisis, right? I thought it was really powerful for him to put on the table. He said, look, these are savvy individuals in Ukraine. They're all the time. He's like, but access to information does not equal education. And having those curated experiences, those experiences where you're guiding, again, I want to bring it back to that, is it's just a completely different universe. And as you were saying in the very beginning, Anne, how do you determine what's real, what's not real? How do you determine what's a good source, what's not a good source? Like the librarian function, even if we just call it that, is really, really powerful. Sorry, I just wanted to highlight that.
That was, I think, so part of what we kind of looked at, just from the timing is, we joined mid-pandemic. So it's been interesting just to watch what's happened in higher education. We were both in higher education for a long time and seeing the transition through the pandemic and now having these sort of conversations sort of post-pandemic. but I think to your earlier point, I think Ann touches on this on the notion of inclusiveness. Right? The same thing is I want to emphasize not thinking about this as a piece of technology, but really thinking about this as an extension of the campus experience.
Right.
And if we really want to extend this out, thinking about the future and thinking about metaversities and virtual reality, now all of a sudden that device really becomes sort of your portal. And it can be personalized to where you say not all of a sudden do you have basically that device, but your avatar sort of becomes part of that persona for a university. And as many of us who've been looking at this technology, like augmented and virtual reality, has the potential to be one of the most disruptive technologies and introduced into higher education.
Sure, absolutely.
Because the concepts you can teach on that platform, which you can't teach really any other way. So it's not difficult to think about the extension of like this device that we carry on our pocket today is just what it looks like in 2022. This is going to continue to evolve into like something that comes into your glasses or contacts or wearables where you may not even carry your phones around.
Right.
So thinking about that progression and what does that mean to college students?
I'd really be interested to hear or see if your research goes in this direction as well. That how do we flip the conversation from stigma to include, to a part of the club? I'm not even sure what the word is there to be included, but I'm just thinking, you walk around a campus, you see everybody is wearing the logo, everybody's got the sweatshirt on, you've got books and devices that, have the mascot and those. Like, again, this is me thinking in the future, but how does handing somebody their device or saying, look, you're a part of us. Like, this is a part of our bringing you in, we're saying we want you here. And that's just another way to like include, that kind of
Absolutely, that's a part of this conversation, and we haven't even gone there. Is about the online community, the online learning community. Just brought that up. There's got to be a sense, for strategic reasons for the university to have that alumni, right? Sort of power and support. But those online students are just as important to feel a part of the campus and feel like they're a part of the university. And so sending a student a branded device that has a built-in community, that has an avatar, or whatever, whatever that technology is. I'm not really super tech savvy.
I don't believe that.
It's not
but,
true.
But to make sure that those students are connected, sending a device that's branded is a huge part of that, because it says, hey, listen, thanks for signing up with us. We want your education experience to be part of our university. And so therefore, here is what you're going to need. And we've preloaded everything. Here's your support. Here's your open educational resources, which is a whole nother conversation that I think every institution should be using.
We're huge on OER. We've had lots of conversations about it. We love OER.
And you can't access OER if you don't have a device and connectivity, right?
You guys get together with the OpenStack people and start talking to them.
Yeah. So, here's all of this because we care about you and we want you to be successful. Knowing that a university cares about you as a student is a huge part of feeling that sense of belonging. And if you have a sense of belonging, you're going to be loyal.
And you're going to take care of the device, and you're going to show up, and you're going to take that extra effort, and you're going to bring other people in, and you're going to support the peers.
Yeah.
So in many ways, it's funny when we started this conversation, I kind of use the term, raising the bar, and then I kind of stop myself. It's like, no, there is no bar. We're talking about creating a bar where there is what does it mean like when every student that comes to the university, right, has the same device and the same access, as far as the connectivity. The other aspect of this is, schools are really thinking about ways to engage alumni. What if upon graduation you take that device with you, or you have that device now is available to alumni? So you think about alumni engagement or ways to be able to connect alumni with students. We talked about this sort of peer-to-peer mentoring. Imagine the power of being able to do, like, literally have a mentor in an industry in which you're, interested as a student to be able to have access.
Sure.
So there's some
mentorship path, workforce development paths, all that.
So this really enables some things that would be really difficult for a university to execute on all the myriad of devices that students come to campus with, or don't in some cases. The other aspect is you talked about sort of how did this get financed. I've had a couple of conversations just within the last month of universities that are spending millions of dollars to put Wi-Fi in their parking lots in a northern climate.
Sure.
with this assumption that the students are basically going to go to their car because we don't have adequate sort of connectivity or devices for that. Not only is that not equitable access, it's like that's not really good. Just thinking about like sitting in class with 20-degree weather. So what if that $2 or $3 million was actually invested in campus devices, where those students can actually access their learning anywhere, not have to worry about coming to the parking lot or going to the McDonald's parking lot or whatever to be able to have access to Wi-Fi.
Because learning happens everywhere.
Right. Well, not only learning happens everywhere, but just when you put it so starkly like that, again, you don't want to call out anyone, but it's like, well, why would you put the money there when you could have spent either the same amount or a fraction of it?
Shift. It is a paradigm shift.
Well, you got to stop thinking of the campus as a place.
Exactly.
Well, yes, that and I think there are a lot of IT leaders that pride themselves on their ability to blanket the campus with Wi-Fi coverage. So as a former CIO, though, what I would say, and I'm sure this is probably not very popular, is that the strength of your network has nothing to do with the core mission of the institution. The core mission of the institution is graduating students and creating knowledge. And so I would challenge CIOs and other IT leaders to really think about this. And this is where I think T-Mobile as a company comes in. This is where we can partner. So that way, you're not spending so much money on things that are not mission critical, and you're really sort of partnering with a company. If we can run a national network, it probably help your campus, right? And I think given many schools are experiencing a decrease in enrollment. We've talked about the financial implications of that. Every school is sort of experiencing increases in operational costs, anywhere from 10 to 20%. So regardless of what's happening with that school, whether they've gotten back to their enrollment numbers or not, they have some real financial challenges. So and those technologies like Wi-Fi or email or computer storage, those are commodity technologies, and vendors that are here at the show are really here to partner and to help universities really offset some of those operational costs so that the resources that the universities do have can be reinvested in something that's mission critical. But we actually believe that a connected device is more closely connected to the core mission of an institution than a lot of the IT infrastructure that sits over.
So half an hour has gone by like that, as it always does. For you, the final word, like what's the next step in your research and what you're doing, the future, those things?
Yeah, so looking to partner with schools who are measuring the impact of providing devices to students. So we've had a couple institutions say, we're really interested in this. There's not a lot of literature out there. What can we do together to really get some good data and research out there? I've done some qualitative research with students, asking them about their challenges. So building upon that and helping to make this conversation meaningful with those types of data as we continue to partner with schools to try to move this forward.
And Michael, thank you so much for stopping by today. Fascinating conversation. Really love it. I'd love to see what's going to go in the future. So I hope you'll check back in.
Sounds good.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Okay, once again, we are back here at Educause. It's the lunch hour,
It is.
and I can't thank you enough for coming by to speak with me. Is it Rourke? Is that
It is Rourke,
Okay, so
yeah.
Daniel Rourke, and you were with
Dell
Dell.
Technologies, yeah. I'm a senior higher education
So
strategist.
I had T-Mobile on just a second ago, and we were talking about digital inclusiveness.
Excellent.
So they've got awesome data on what is the BYOD model and these kinds of things. Fantastic. You want to talk about learning spaces and the evolution of the learning space model. The thing that I love, you did like a gaming thing here, didn't you?
Yeah, we just had an esports tournament with local Colorado college students.
Tell me, how important is esports? I just need to, I still try to explain it to my wife. I know that, but this is billions of dollars now.
It is almost $2 billion industry at this point.
Unbelievable.
So it is incredibly important. I will 100% admit I am biased, so want to be transparent out there. I've been a gamer geek since I was a little girl, and definitely wish I had these opportunities. But it is incredibly important, in my opinion, because of the community it allows the students, and it also provides them with voice and choice in how they're learning, what they want to go on to do as a career. And esports can give them so many amazing global competencies, professional competencies, experiential learning. If you see what it takes to set up an esports tournament, you know those students are working logistics, problem solving, critical thinking, all of those things.
Now, for a parent, I'm a parent of, I don't have a college age student yet, but soon. I'm biased as well, but let's talk to them for a second, and the institutions around here. Like, a lot of people see Fortnite, a lot of people see some of the violent games, these kinds of things, but also some people see Minecraft and whatnot. The esports universe, what does it consist of? What are the most popular things out there? I know that we want to talk about learning spaces,
Yeah, no worries.
but how are we having that conversation, and who's having the aha moment around, yes, we want to invest in this, or is the industry just kind of taking care of itself and higher ed hasn't really paid attention?
I would definitely say the former. There are so many schools out there that are starting to pay attention to it. They're seeing the results from other schools in their area. They're seeing news stories, they're seeing articles, they're seeing videos, they're seeing events like Educause and things that we're doing here, and they're seeing the engagement. They're seeing people crowd around the booth. And these are not necessarily students anymore. These are professional adults that are very possibly far along in their career, that are understanding and that are starting to see it. I would say probably 5 to 10 years ago, it was more of a, why would we ever want to put video games in school? But now they're starting to see, okay, there's an incredible amount of benefit as far as community building for the students. Many of the students that belong in esports programs never really found their niche on campus anywhere. So this gives them a place of belonging, a place where they can feel like, okay, yeah, these people are my people, and we can get along and learn and do things together. But above that, I need to trademark this. I kind of call it my esports engagement pyramid, where above that,
for everyone out there, this is IP right here. Do not steal this.
But on top of that community building, which if that's where the school stays, it's great. But on top of that, you have the academic and the curriculum and the helping students along on career pathways, like streaming, like shoutcasting, like doing the AV setup for events. Those are all things that schools can invest in, and that the schools themselves can also benefit from by offering new programs. And then there's even the little top pyramid of research. There's strong academic research going on. So that is, all of those things combined together are just a powerhouse for schools and communities and students to be able to partner together and really develop a greater understanding, the greater offering. And it does tie back to learning spaces, because then truly you've got a video game arena or a space, and that's a learning space for students.
I'm the only word that's going through my head right now is stickiness.
Yes.
Right? It's how do I keep my students on campus? Holy smokes. Or how do I, even if we think of campus as a virtual engaged universe, this is something that they're attaching themselves to, especially if there's something that they're really enjoying. I mean, we all know the classic gamer persona is somebody who's in a cave for days at a time, whatever. So a stickiness for a university especially if you can put it into an educational frame, huge.
Yes, it's absolutely huge. We were just talking with one of the students over in the Dell booth about kind of interviewing him and saying I've been with this group for 4 to 5 years because I believe in it, and I see the benefit that it gives to my other students and peers. And so it is just a wonderful tool for engagement that more universities should definitely be paying attention to, and we're here to help.
So tie this to the evolution of learning spaces. I mean, we could sit here and riff about gaming for all day.
We
But which maybe we should. I don't know. Maybe we should. But what? So what else have you talked about? What other? You said you had posters. You've had other presentations as well.
Yeah.
What were those about? Like talking about learning spaces in general.
Absolutely. Well, our panel is coming up literally right after this.
Oh,
so
okay, great.
Very
Okay,
excited.
I thought maybe it already
sneak peek
happened.
on this podcast. So, but yeah, it is. We're going to be focusing on the evolution of higher education learning spaces because it's no longer sage on the stage. It's no longer just sitting in the back of the classroom and pretending not to sleep while someone lectures at you for 2 hours. Students are demanding more, and especially the students that are in school now that are getting ready to enter the higher ed space. They have been digital natives, and I know that term is overused, but they truly have grown up with technology at their fingertips and more interactive ways of coming together and experiencing things. So we need to make sure that the classrooms adapt to that.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make sure that the classrooms are engaging and are mobile and have elements where you can participate in either a face-to-face model, a hybrid model, or even a high-flex model where sometimes you're having remote students, maybe even a remote instructor participating at the same time as in-person students, and still being able to enable that learning to happen efficiently and effectively.
So a question I just asked my previous guests, and I'm finding that this is becoming really important to me because I know it's a total personal, what's that called, sample of convenience kind of question.
Yeah.
How, as these learning spaces are evolving, and as you've just put all kinds of different scenarios on the table, what are the strategies that you found or are finding to create belonging and to create feeling like one of the huge things about going to a school, you choose it because you love the brand or you love the campus or you love what it means, but
Parents went there.
We're not about legacy students here, but no. I guess you see where I'm going with this question of if it's remote or if I can kind of participate from anywhere, what are the elements of making me feel like I'm a part of something?
Absolutely. Well, and with the pandemic, we really saw this emergence of the high flex label, and so a lot of people we actually do have a presentation about that. But the difference between just kind of traditional hybrid learning and high flex learning, and for such a long time, hybrid learning has been around, but it's been a case of if you're there, if you're there in person, great, you get all of the synchronous content and all of that interaction. But if you're not there in person, then you just have to watch the recording and do that. So I think the challenge for technologists, especially in the higher education space now, is to challenge those old status quos and to say, no, we need to create these more collaborative spaces where students can face each other, where they can interact, they can do group work, they can do single work. We talk a lot about David Thornburg's research with the campfires, the caves, and the watering holes.
I don't know this. No, this is...
Go check it out.
Okay.
David Thornburg, campfires, caves, and watering holes. But the fact that many different students, just like we all have different communication styles, students have different learning styles. And so not only does a particular student have a different learning style, but they may have different learning needs for their environment at different times. So, for example, a campfire where you're gathered together in a small, intimate group, maybe that's for project work. Maybe that's for learning together or studying a very hard, difficult concept to understand. And then you have, things like the caves, where that's your private space where you are very kind of by yourself and you're able to be immersed in the content. And so not only can you have students that need those very different spaces, but the same student at different times. So making those available on campus is critical.
So take me to, and I've said this on a number of conversations, we tend to divide the learning universe into like K-12, higher ed, and then corporate, right? Like, how is this, do you get to look at all of those spaces as well, and has the high flex, the gaming, has that bled into, okay, I'm not in higher ed anymore, but I want to bring that into my work environment? And I'll put a sub question there, because I saw the pushback I've seen the pushback from like the Google campus and the Facebook campus, where it's like, I don't necessarily want to live at work.
Right.
So, talk to me about that.
Absolutely. Well, and I think truly, hopefully I'll answer your question, but my opinion
Whichever
on that,
one you want to answer, and there was like 5 in there, I don't know.
There were a couple, but the way that I feel and truly like the way that Dell feels is that it needs to be collaborative. There are many challenges that higher education
may not be able to face it themselves. And we've seen that higher education institutions cannot necessarily tackle themselves, but industry partnerships go a long way in that. So making sure that you have good partners that you believe in, that believe in you, that you're operating under the same mission goals of educating and making the world a better place, that is so critical to have those partnerships, because then the industry can provide business cases, the industry can provide internships, the industry can provide their own training. Like at Dell, we actually have Student Tech Crew, which is a program where students can get certified on Dell products, Dell services, and they can not only help their current institution that they are attending, but that they can take those skills into the workplace, and it benefits us as well, because then more people know how to work on our products. So it's a truly collaborative partnership that really helps amplify the fact that higher ed and industry do need to be working together, and it's not an either or thing.
Awesome, fantastic. What's next for learning spaces in your mind? Like, one of the questions I was asking Lisa Stevens and Rebecca Frazee, is that right?
I guess, yeah.
Sorry. I asked them yesterday is, a lot of campuses have these, the buildings are already built, the architecture is already there. How are we evolving the spaces that we already have to make them more learning inclusive, learning friendly, adapting to active learning models, these kinds of things? Is there a process, a method, a thing? Like, can you turn any room into a new learning environment, that kind of stuff?
I am a firm believer that you can.
Okay.
And speaking of Lisa Stevens and Rebecca, the flex space, all of those resources to be able to say, okay, how did other schools do it? What were they doing that was successful? What worked, what didn't? What trials and tribulations did they go through? Learning together has been something that higher ed has been exemplary at for years. That is something that needs to continue as we get into this evolution of learning spaces. Working together, finding out what helps. Dell did a case study with Montana State University at Billings, where they were actually changing up their classrooms, adding more touch screens, adding more audio, video ability, just in different ways, so that there were these capabilities for the students, whether they were remote, whether they were on campus, whether they were commuting in a bus or a train or something like that they could still interact with the course and still hear everything, see everything on the board, and have those opportunities for learning. So definitely Google Dell Technologies Montana State University Billings and take a look at that use case, because there were some great examples of how they brought in technology to actually update their learning spaces and start rolling that out to more spaces on campus.
Talk to me about what you're most excited about in the near-term future. Like, where does your research go? Where does your program go? I mean, you get this massive, super, super cool mesh of the gaming space plus the learning space. Like, where are you going? Like, what are you excited about for the next 18 months?
I'm so excited about so many things. So I'm going to try to narrow it down. One thing
Give
too.
me two. Give me three. I don't care. That's great.
Okay, fine. So one of the things that we are doing, actually, if you again Google UT Austin Gaming Lounge with Alienware.
By the way, can you just say how pissed I am that I'm old?
I know. Where was this
like,
when we were going to
seriously,
school?
like, yeah.
Yeah. I have that conversation all the time. But yes, so this gaming lounge is amazing, and it is something. They took a very small space, like 700 square feet on campus, that really wasn't being utilized incredibly well. It was just kind of a flow over space, place for students to drop things, eat, do whatever. We were able to partner with them and with some of our design partners and create this incredibly engaging gaming lounge, where it's not only for their esports team, which is a great esports team, by the way, but
what do they play?
Everything, League of Legends, Overwatch, etc. So not only that, but they are also making sure that all of the students on the UT Austin campus can come in, experience it. I've heard that there have been some days where there are like students looking through the glass, what are they doing?
I'm sure, yeah.
So any time that you can create, believer that esports arenas, gaming lounges, etc., are active learning spaces
100%.
that they can be transformed. They can not only help do experiential learning, they can help do research, they can help in so many ways, and you can multi-purpose them.
One of the things that was a huge aha moment for me, I can't remember who I was talking to about this, but if you think about the level of effort that a gaming company puts into making sure that someone who first downloads a game stays with the game.
Mm-hmm.
That is all learning, right? So it's how do you introduce the character? How do you introduce the avatar? How do you introduce the different modalities of playing the game, and leveling up from there. What could we learn just from these institutions that have figured out, again, that stickiness of here's how I get started, here's how I stay, and then you're hooked, right?
Mhm.
Imagine we do that with so many other types of education, right? It would be fantastic. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and one of the things we're starting to see more and more of the gaming publishers recognize that, okay, we need to pay attention to education, not only from the facet that you were talking about, but also in how do we reach out to the educational institutions and get stickier and make sure that they know the different types of products and offerings we have. Epic is a great example of that with Unreal Engine and Twin Motion.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless of whether you want to be in advertising or architecture, design or gaming, there is something there that Epic is offering to anybody who is learning, and they are offering some of their coursework for free on Unreal Engine. So you don't even necessarily have to be in educational institutions. You can do it on your own for free, which again goes back to that industry and educational partnerships. It's so critical to make sure that you're combining those resources to give the best experience to students.
Fantastic. I can't think enough of this conversation. It sounds like they want us to stop. No, I know it's lunch hour. But this is where we're going to say Daniel Rourke, Dell Technologies. Can people reach out to you? Is it like research or anything like that? How do they do that?
Absolutely. So my email is danielle.rourke@dell.com, so fairly easy. I'm also on Twitter. It's at HiEdDanielle, but it's HIED Danielle. And then I'm also on LinkedIn.
Super cool. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time.